Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the MNCAA podcast, Gopher Show, That Gopher Hockey Puckcast. I'm Drew Cove, joined as always by Nate Wells at Gopher State on Twitter, or X or whatever whatever you do nowadays. I know both of us are trying to take a little bit more, Nate more than I, a more concerted break from some of the social media stuff, and I think it's both very good for a lot of your brains. So in lieu of the TikTok thing happening and a lot of that type of stuff too, highly encourage you to delete those apps off your phone. It's been great for my brain. I love it. I don't have Instagram really much anymore. It's awesome. But that's beside the point. What an intro to the podcast, Nate. Now let's get to what we're really supposed to be talking about. The Gopher men's hockey team. They played Notre Dame this weekend in a game that in a series that we had called we had sort of more or less called for need to be a 6-point weekend. If you've been paying attention the last day or so since the games happened, or you watched the games too, you'll realize that didn't happen. The Gophers came out really good, actually. I mean, they did fall behind 1-0 in both games on the weekend, but the difference was Friday night they came back and scored 5 goals in the first period for a 5-1 lead after the first. But Saturday wasn't the same, kind of a back and forth. Notre Dame scored, the Gophers scored. It was back and forth the whole night, a bunch of 1-0 or a bunch of 1-goal deficits for the Gophers. And then a long 3-3 tie, and then a lot of stuff that we'll talk about in the third period, and then an overtime loss. 4-3, that I should say. So 5-2 win, 4-3 overtime loss for the Gophers for 4 points on a weekend where we would have liked to seen them get 6, especially with, as we'll mention again later in the podcast, a pretty daunting weekend looming. But Nate, let's get your thoughts. What do you think of the 4-point performance from the Gophers this weekend?
It was a big opportunity for the Gophers to get in there, show that they can take care of business against teams lower than them in the standings. And they certainly, for the first period on Friday, you saw the Gophers at their best. 5 goals, complete domination. I believe it was like 24-5 in shots. Mm-hmm. Anytime that you can put 5 goals to 5 shots, you're getting into that, like, you're getting to that Class A, like move them up to Class AA talk. Mm-hmm. You get for at least one team every time in the Minnesota State High School Hockey Tournament. So the Gophers at their best on Friday. You certainly saw them show it at times on Saturday, but a bit of a closer game going against a more defensive-based team. There are opportunities. There's certainly a lot to like about the weekend and a lot to like about the Gophers. But, at the end of the day, when you have the opportunity for 6 points, you kind of get that like cherry on top split. I don't really know what to call 4 points in a weekend. It's not as easy to tell what an overtime loss is.
Yeah.
But certainly left a little bit on the table, but there's still a lot to like about the weekend.
Yeah, just if it ended in a way where you just kind of leave feeling a little worse. I mean, like it left you feeling like they only got 2 points rather than just the 4 or something like that. It just didn't feel, especially because the major amount of success the Gophers had was all the way in the first 20 of the full 120 minute weekend, and then it was just kind of. It was Gophers playing good hockey, but not great hockey from then on. And it definitely, I mean, I was kind of, after the first period, I definitely assumed the Gophers were going to come out hot, especially after how the first game against Ohio State went the last weekend. Guns a-blazing, it made a lot of sense to me. But seeing kind of Notre Dame, it looked like to me just Notre Dame was trying to play. They kind of convince themselves that they could play like the Gophers do, and I think just the talent disparity is so different from that style for Notre Dame, is that they probably got a little bit of a talking to in the first intermission, saying you can't take the Gophers game to the Gophers with our team. That's just not going to work. And then I think they settled in nicely, and obviously the last 40 they outscored the Gophers 1-0, but it didn't matter that much at that point. But I think they kind of took it to heart for the full 60 on Saturday, and obviously got through with a couple of points. But it was just a weird weekend to see. Yeah, the Gophers coming out a-blazing, but then like you kind of assume that like, all right, the Gophers typically when they have a first period that dominant, it's almost always they take a little bit of a step off, like the gas lets up a little bit. And obviously I think they played sound hockey, but just certainly not as just doggedly aggressive all the way down the lineup. But yeah, it was kind of a weird weekend for the Gophers, just kind of trailing off from the highest of highs in the very beginning to obviously the overtime period of just a real low of, especially even like just the possession numbers. I mean, it was just all. I mean, the Gophers had the puck for 3-4 seconds totally in the overtime period.
If that.
Yeah, exactly. And it turned out to be obviously the result they didn't want in overtime. They wanted to get it over with in overtime for the Gophers' sake, because we know about their shootout trends. But yeah, not it does seem kind of gloomy, at least the way it ended, but definitely not a terrible weekend for the Gophers. But Nate, let's just kind of get into some of the nitty gritty from the games as well. It was good to see kind of in the lineup chart a few of the guys that we've been looking to see back. Cal Thomas and August Falloon both back this weekend, and Cal Thomas, I think, making a big impact. I think especially Friday's game, watching him kind of closely, was seeing kind of the stuff that he was doing was really impressive, and very good to see him back, especially after obviously it after the game without the score sheet, it falls a little bit maybe out of your brain a little bit, but I think John Whipple still has some room to grow, and I think that was apparent in Friday's game. But good to have Cal Thomas back on the other side of that coin to help take some of those heavier minutes away, and let the freshman defenseman develop, just like every freshman defenseman needs to do.
You nailed it right there. It's just having Cal Thomas in the lineup. It lets everyone play at a level where they can develop, and they aren't being pushed to do more than they need to. They're set up in a spot to succeed. And Kel Thomas, the things that he does on defense makes the Gophers a better team on the blue line, and that certainly was apparent in Friday's game. And I mean, a game where I think the Gophers only faced something like 15, 16 shots in that game.
Yep.
So having that opportunity, and then of course it was nice also to see him get rewarded offensively. For get the first goal of the season, someone who you don't really expect to chip in too much on that end. It's always nice to kind of have that opportunity. And then also having August Falloon back in the lineup on Saturday. It feels basically the Gophers are as healthy as they've been in a long time, which is going to be very important given the teams that they play down the stretch starting next weekend against Michigan State. So the Gophers, for a stretch of basically playing 16, 17 skaters, because that's all they had, throwing in anyone who was able to play in the lineup. Now there's certainly a bit more opportunities for players to be in positions to succeed. And also, just if you're not playing well in the lineup, then you're not going to be playing. There actually is that a possibility, as opposed to, hey, you have skate, you're on this team, go.
Exactly. It is nice to see, especially when and those guys are performing, like you said. Cal Thomas getting a goal, Mason Nevers goals in back-to-back games. Some of the guys that they're getting back here, and it's cool. Nevers doing it against basically his old high school teammates, like half the roster being Edina grads at one point or another, and that's obviously
you're like Edina grads, like their brothers played for the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but pretty much everybody else, like I guess it's like maybe those are like the teams you put into when you do like the inner team like championships or whatever.
Something with gold helmets and being a very legacy heavy team goes hand in hand, and the Gophers and Notre Dame are no stranger to brothers, just long-term descendants and things like that. And you can do a lot of connections games between the Notre Dame and Minnesota rosters over the years. That's for sure. But good to see Jimmy Snuggerud. Speaking of legacy,
speaking of legacies,
some legacy players. Jimmy Snuggerud, boy, his 3 goals on the weekend. He continues to perform, and I think we mentioned it a little last week, just kind of trying to at least allude to a little bit of the flowers that we need to give him. But he has, and I thought even off the puck, I think he just looked like he was making things happen, making chances happen, and being the guy that we've mentioned off and on over the course of the year that we want him to be, and think he's becoming, at least this year, is that true absolute leader that the Gophers need, both in just work ethic, example, and being able to be the game breaker. I think Jimmy Snuggerud has that, and it's becoming boring's the wrong word, but I mean it seems to be the most applicable because 2-goal games, 3-goal weekends are commonplace for him, and it's hard to it's almost hard to say, okay, that's very notable because it is consistency for him. So it's really impressive to see that and to be so high in the country in terms of scoring and to do it consistently, especially at the start of the second half.
Yeah, greatness and consistency it's boring. It would be that is kind of the secret of it, is when you're doing well and you're enjoying the monotony of doing everything day in and day out. And certainly Jimmy Snuggerud is reaching a point where just he is setting up others. He is scoring a goal. He's having multiple goal weekends. It shouldn't be boring to be able to go look and be like, you got a 3-goal weekend again. And he certainly set up others. His line mates, Eric Paulson, again, I think we speak this again every week where we keep thinking that he's just taking some steps forward.
Mm-hmm. He's playing like he's a junior.
He's playing like he's a junior. And it just, you keep seeing these from Jimmy Snuggerud week in and week out, as opposed to someone I think maybe like a Matthew Wood, who I would say certainly is playing extremely well. But you notice a little bit more highs and lows, and certainly in his game compared to Jimmy Snuggerud. And this is exactly what we were hoping to see from Jimmy Snuggerud this year, if you stick around for his junior season. I mean, I'll flip it on the other side. I think you can say the same thing with Sam Renzel on the blue line, which has been extremely, extremely fascinating to watch. Just his own consistency on the blue line and just making those steps forward from year to year, week to week, game to game.
Yeah, it's crazy too, considering how offensively focused this Gophers team has been on the back end. I mean, Kester with two points or 2 assists on the weekend as well. But it is just kind of crazy to think that Sam Renzel's blown past a lot of his career numbers long before this weekend, obviously. But he's up there in terms of just regardless of position, just skaters points wise in the country. And defenseman, he's certainly been neck and neck with somebody that Wild fans might be pretty keen on, Zeev Bouillon, with his prowess so far on the back end. But I mean, it makes me think too. When I was kind of watching a lot of Renzel, and then seeing a lot of Ryan Chesley and how dominant I think he can be at times. Just think like on a different roster or even a different Gophers team, Chesley would be the guy getting so much of the offensive defenseman praise. But on this team with Sam Renzel, it's almost like he gets overlooked sometimes. And that's not to say we're trying to overlook him, because I think he seems to be just kind of a good leader guy and a good offensive defenseman example to kind of help usher in a lot of the future Gopher defenders into that type of style. But on a lot of other teams, Ryan Chesley would be the absolute number one, and I think it just goes to show how blessed the Gophers are with the level of depth. There we go. Check off the bingo box. It's our podcast and mentioning the depth, and we talk about different guys and fitting that bill every week. But this week, it certainly is Ryan Chesley and Sam Renzel, and it's obviously a round back to Cal Thomas, having a lot of those guys playing different roles, of course, between those two and Thomas, but. It's good to have on a team that you expect really great things from.
Certainly, and I feel like at this point, Mike Kester is pretty much used to that being kind of a quality offensive, quality two-way, just knowing that he's going to be overshadowed by 2 different guys, whether it's you're going with Faber, Johnson, or if you're talking about Renzel and Chesley now. He's like, all right, well, it's going to be the guy.
Yeah, exactly.
This is certainly
he's here to play the game and play it well, and he's been absolutely doing that for the last few years.
And you're right. You're right. It's a problem that like 50 other schools would love to have.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's amazing too, because I was thinking of just I thought watching obviously I think again this week I think Nevers and Hendrickson looked good together. I think that's a good pairing that like Nevers just really somehow makes Hendrick. He's in the places to make Hendrickson look really good, a lot better I think than he has kind of with a lot of different line mates so far this season. But also John Middlestat playing down on that line as well. I was just thinking, I'm like, man, those guys are the fourth line. I know Bob doesn't really he likes to shift them around a lot in terms of where they are on the actual sheet, but on a lot of other teams, a line of Hendrickson, Nevers, and John Middlestat would be a lot higher in the lineup in terms of they would be playing a very different roles if they were on 75% of the rest of and the rest of the college hockey teams in the country. Just playing a more kind of offensively elevated role, I think, too. And that just goes to show how well put together this Gophers team is, to have a lot of guys that can do a lot of different things, and to be a lead by example guy, and to kind of grind away against some other teams' fourth liners. It's important to have those guys, and they could be shifted up in the lineup when they need to be, when you don't have a full roster, when Nick Michael is playing, when Axel Begley is playing forward. It's good to have those guys that are available. And I think, obviously, definitely gets away from the 4 out of 6 points on the weekend for the Gophers. But I think those guys playing together and getting more reps together, really, just with all the guys that have been injured, is going to help them down the line the rest of the season, starting with this upcoming weekend.
This is one of those things where you kind of are hoping that, hey, you can actually get some time to get a little bit more chemistry, gel a little bit more, because it's certainly not been the case as we enter more in the second half of the season, where just, there's certainly some lines and some pairings have formed at certain points of the year, but also just through injuries and everything, it's not really been able to get too much time. I think, honestly, no one is kind of shows off that you can play the fourth line, you can play the second line or first line mentality more than Aaron Hughlin. He's kind of seen him do a bit of everything this year, and he makes everyone better around him. And that is certainly a skill that comes really in handy with this team. And you certainly hope, as players and lines are able to kind of come together, that just you have that everyone kind of knows the role and knows where they can contribute in different ways. So we certainly have some consistency. You know what? I'm going to make a little bit of a segue here. We've kind of been beating around it a little bit for Saturday, but
you're going right where I was.
It'd be wrong. It'd be wrong with the lack to talk about a little bit more consistency with the refereeing during that third period in overtime. I'll let you have first take, Drew, on this one.
Yeah, you know what? We've talked a lot about the positives over the weekend, and it'd be wrong of us to neglect some of the negatives. And a lot of that was the third period on Saturday, and as Nate mentioned, some of the consistency with the refereeing. We're not going to try and be a 30-minute of ref bashing podcast, I promise you. But seeing some of the things that went down in the third period, specifically in Saturday's game, Oliver Moore receiving a cross check to the face. Brian Chesley being interfered with in the overtime period. There were a few more that kind of blend together after watching a lot of the game and just seeing interference, cross-checking, just kind of call after call missed. And it seemed like there could have been 4 in the third period alone go in the Gophers' favor. And obviously the interference kind of having Chesley wrapped up in the sequence that led directly to Notre Dame's game winner. It's frustrating to see. If you have a chance to go back and listen to the radio call, Wally Shaver and Jack Ramsey out on the call. I listened back to that, and it was a treat. I can tell you that it was a little. It was good because it did seem like they were kind of calling it like they saw it, and they were definitely Wally was going out of his way to say, you know what, we're not just saying this to say it, folks. Like, this is. I don't know what they're looking at right now. It was pretty funny, and it did kind of just some of the things, and obviously a lot of times if you're a fan too, and you can kind of go through and have you're definitely rooting for your team, and you can see some things a bit more egregious than maybe they really are. But it looked like it did look like there were just a few just missed. Just completely missed calls. Just kind of you're looking right at it, and just that type of, and you just don't blow the whistle. And I think Minnesota's been good at drawing penalties, Nate, like we were talking about before the show, and just being good at drawing penalties, and there was a shift in the third period, and I thought they deserved a few more calls. And that's not to say that the Gophers lost the game solely because of officiating. That's not true. The Gophers certainly could have played a lot better and had a lead at any point in Saturday's game. They did not have a lead at any point in Saturday's game. It was a lot of one goal deficits to come back from, but I think they should have been given within the rules of the game, given a few opportunities to play with a man advantage. So disappointing to see kind of some of those ones that, like, especially the cross check to the helmet. It's like, could have been a punch, could have been any of that would have been reviewed for something a bit more serious, and it was disappointing to see that some of that didn't go through. Nate, what do you have to say? Kind of what are your thoughts, kind of on that third period and in some of the consistency there?
I mean, there was consistency. Just it was. I don't know what it would take to get a penalty on either side. Just the refs would essentially swallow their whistle, like went out and just like would not call a single thing. And granted, when Minnesota and Notre Dame played one another in South Bend, one of the big parts of the series was that the Gophers controlled puck possession. They forced Notre Dame into tough situations and took penalties. Outside the one where was it Brody Lamb, Brody Zemer who got the knee on knee?
Lamb.
I'm confused. It was Lamb. Yeah, I wanted to say Lamb. Okay, I want to say Lamb, but I didn't want to confuse my two Brodies. But other than that one, but like in that case, still, it's Minnesota had power plays. They took advantage of the power plays, and they're able to kind of take what were closer games and push them aside into more blowout territory. And in this case, where it was, I mean, we've seen this game from Minnesota many times this season, where you know what, they give up an early goal, they look extremely comfortable playing from a deficit, they come back, they keep coming back. And it really at no point were you feeling that the Gophers were out of a 1-goal game against Notre Dame, which, you know, actually against with a defensive base team like Notre Dame, that is actually, I mean, that is progress. But at the same time, well, but part of their game is also that you're going to have possession and you're going to create opportunities. And you're going to create odd man rushes and power plays, and you're not going to get those power plays. Well, that makes it one less weapon to have. The Gophers certainly had several opportunities to tie the game, take the lead. Certainly a couple open nets, a couple just shots, a passage that just missed. But at the same time, it's more frustrating than anything. It's just to see where, hey, every time that something's going on, just no call on top of no call, and kind of they start to compound on one another when you're just waiting to see if anything's going to get called. And it's a weekend where, in a game where I don't think that like I will not say that referee cost the Gophers 2 points at all. The Gophers,
correct,
performance certainly, they played well, but they didn't play well enough to win. And I believe that they'll be the first ones to say that. And it's certainly a lot of lessons to take away from, hey, as comfortable as Minnesota is playing down a goal and playing against playing against a defensive based team, how can we do a better job creating chances? How can we do a better job creating goals? Because they're going to play against top goaltenders. I think you could tell the difference playing against Owens the rest of the weekend outside of that first period on Friday.
Yeah.
And the teams that they're going to be playing up against, and at the end of the day, are all going to have top goaltenders, whether Trey Augustine this weekend with Michigan State, Boston College has Jacob Fowler, who has certainly proven has his own international cred and has that, and going on there. I forget the kid's name in Maine, but he's having a fantastic season. Western Michigan has the really great goalie platoon, Cameron Rowe, in his like 8th year or whatever he's in now.
Looked good against Michigan this weekend.
Yeah. So you got these. So you have all these top teams who have top tier goaltending, and that's going to be for the Gophers. It's how do we solve this? And I mean, I didn't even bring in Matt Thomas with Denver. So like all these teams have top goalies that they're going to have to solve. And at the end of the day, that's going to be something Minnesota is going to need to find out for themselves. You can't rely on refereeing. You can certainly put yourself in position to have power plays and draw penalties, but they're not always going to be there at the end of the day. You certainly have to find multiple weapons, and you have to find ways to create opportunities to score and put shots on that, get rebounds, or find that extra step to get the open net.
Yeah, I mean, very rarely is the team that gets the advantage of all the calls is the one that is the very well best set up to win the national championship. You're going to have to fight through some adversity is basically what I'm saying through that. You're going to have calls not go your way. You're going to have missed calls not go your way. And to be able to fight through that and to beat a top goaltender to say, all right, well, if they're not going to give us a penalty, we're going to do it 5-on-5. That's how the great teams kind of write their stories in going through and making that national championship run. So maybe it's a little bit of a blessing to make the Gophers a little aware of, all right, I mean, we can't, not that they weren't sitting there saying, oh, we can rely on the officiating to win us games, but I think
they're not the Kansas City Chiefs. Come on.
Exactly. But they're not out of bounds, flopping to the ground after a slight push, but that's beside the point. But I think the Gophers understand all that's in front of them and how they need to win. But I think this is a good show of all right, against a team that isn't, just objectively isn't very good in the conference, not having won a lot of games in the Big Ten Conference, and to show that, all right, I mean, any of these teams can win, even a team that might be below you in the standings or below you in the national tournament ranking seeding. If they're a 1 seed against a 4 seed, like we've seen time and time again, it can happen. So kind of making sure that they're all kind of on their top game every night. And I don't think the Gophers played particularly bad hockey. That's not to say that they played terribly, or they played a lot like they did in the Friday against Ohio State. But that's to say that it helps them understand kind of the ebbs and flows of games and how any team can really win in this high parity era of college hockey, Nate. So really, really interesting to see going forward, and to just kind of take something away from that kind of bad taste loss.
Yeah, this weekend I'm kind of putting this as my closing thought, where it was the opposite of last weekend with Ohio State, where when you're able to win in such dominating fashion on one night, that the team that loses is going to come back strong and want to show that, hey, you can't push us around. And for Minnesota, they know that very well, because they were the team against Ohio State that got routed and were unable to score and unable to make a close game, and then turn it around the next night. The Gophers certainly saw that with Notre Dame on the Saturday game, after being able to dominate an entire period in a way that I don't think we've seen from the Gophers too much this year. Mm-hmm. And to the point where they're almost able to kind of float through and cruise through the last 40 minutes of Friday's game. Maybe took a little bit more time that Saturday, but you need to know that, hey, as much as it goes, you can't float and you can't cruise through 120 minutes or 100 minutes of hockey, no matter who is being played, what teams you're facing. And in the end, that kind of cost them that cost them 2 points on Saturday. They played great at times, but they weren't consistent, and just finding that consistency for a longer stretch of time against a team that, even if a team of Notre Dame's caliber, it's certainly something that will cost them when they play a team like Michigan State next weekend.
Yeah, Nate, like you said, against Michigan State this weekend, let's take a look around the conference in terms of what happened to the rest of the Big Ten, the rest of the other 6 teams, or the other 5 teams, I guess. Let's take a look here. Penn State, they swept Canisius, helped their pairwise out a little bit. Aiden Fink with a hat trick on Friday. Wisconsin wins 6-3 and then ties with Long Island. What are your thoughts, Nate? I know you're a little bit close to Long Island there in terms of taking a close look into their season. Badgers moving up, but LIU kind of making a little bit of an impact here and there against some pretty established college hockey teams.
The Sharks have had a really sneaky good season this year. And I mean, I remember we were kind of a little surprised early in the season when they beat Notre Dame and the way that they did. And they just continued to do that all year, where just win here, another win here, just kind of chipping away and playing an independent schedule. But they're doing it in a way that, even the Badgers tying them doesn't hurt Wisconsin too badly in the pairwise, because, well, even when Wisconsin's losing or not having a great performance, they're either losing in overtime or they're tying. And they found their way from, I think they were in the high 30s, low 40s at one point of like October, November. Mm-hmm. And they've been on a roll enough to put them into a position where they almost they can make noise and they can control what they're doing, because they have so many games left against teams that are in the top end of the pairwise, whether it's Minnesota, whether you have Michigan State, Ohio State, are all ahead of them, and Michigan. So you're kind of looking at a point where the Big Ten probably has 4 teams into the into the NCAA tournament right now. Maybe you can figure out a way to get 5 if the chips go the right way, but the Wisconsin is just, they've been really sneaky. LIU is kind of sneaky, and they're also LIU is kind of a bit more of like they're kind of fit Wisconsin. They fit Wisconsin in my case. Seems kind of what they want to do on a slightly less talented, to be nice about it, way. But I will say that if anyone ever gets a nice chance to see LIU, they know it's they're tough. They're a tough team. They're a tough team to play against.
And the jerseys look pretty sweet too.
Yeah.
But yes,
they play all the Islanders practice rink, so it's kind of an interesting thing. Like, they're pretty much their TV is like it's all produced by LIU, but they'll put on like the channel that the Mets have.
Oh, okay.
But so like it really feels kind of like a nice throwback to when you for those in Minnesota when you watch like the high school hockey games on what was Fox Sports North, what's it, FanDuel now. So it always makes me kind of feel like those style where it's like two people are just kind of commenting on it. Like if Zach Halverson was calling LIU, like I would like do like a second. I wouldn't do like blink a second thing. It'd just be like, yeah, this is right.
Yeah, it's something that makes sense.
Yeah.
Nate, more on to a couple of teams that the Gophers are going to be facing, rounding out the around the conference part of the podcast here. Michigan and Michigan State split a home and home. Wolverines won 3-2 in overtime on Friday. The Spartans came back 4-1 victory on Saturday. Nate, let's just jump into Michigan State coming up. The number 2 and number 3 teams in the pairwise. I got to think it's probably the best, one of the best matchups in college hockey this coming weekend. A lot of people are going to be scoreboard watching, like a lot of Gophers fans probably were this past weekend, seeing, all right, what's Maine up to? All right, what's Michigan State up to? What's Western up to? But it's going to be a really big game for not only the conference, but nationally as well.
It is the big one. I mean, if you look at it, there's a very good chance that this can decide the Big Ten regular season championship. We're going to learn a lot about Minnesota after the Gophers' first matchup. We're playing a little bit shorthanded, going on the road into MUN, which, a packed MUN is better for college hockey. That's going to be great to see. And I think that, the Spartans have certainly held their end of the bargain. They've been playing extremely well. The teams that when they drop a game, it's a little more surprising. Isaac Howard has certainly been one of the top players of college hockey over the last month. He didn't score against the Wolverines, but he had several assists and setting up his line mates. One of them being Charlie Stramel, the wild first round pick from a couple of years ago. But before that, he had a 7-game goal scoring streak. I think he scored 4 goals. He scored 4 goals the weekend prior, and it's just one of those things where between him and Stramel, and I mean, even like I'll throw in like Blake Biondi, who got the OT winner for Notre Dame. Like I see you're seeing people leaving UMD and leaving Wisconsin and just finding success elsewhere. You're like, oh, this is interesting to see. You're seeing some great things from other coaches. I think in the case of Michigan State, Adam Nightingale has just done an amazing job bringing in these players that have talent, and you've seen it at times, but just kind of polishing it and making them shine, along with bringing in his own players and having just using the development skills that he has as the former U.S. National Team Development Program coach there. And just it's great to see for Michigan State, and the fact that we're talking about, hey, this is a big weekend for the Spartans. It's a big weekend for the Gophers. It just really goes to say the job he's done. And more for on the Gopher side, I'm excited to see what we learn about the Gophers being healthy, going into a hostile environment that they really haven't faced too much this year, and seeing what they're made of against a top 5 team and getting Big Ten bragging rights and just kind of what might be a national tournament preview.
Yeah, Nate, it's going to be an interesting series, and I think the biggest thing I'm going to be looking for is, regardless of, I know we've talked a lot about how good it is to see the Gophers comfortable coming from behind and coming back from deficits. But I'm gonna kind of be looking for them to get off to a pretty hot start. Uh, Start the game with the lead somewhere in the first 10 minutes or something like that, and then see what they can do from there and kind of maintaining that part of their game and their offensive aggression and their I guess defensive stinginess. I'm kind of looking for them to get off to a good start and maintain that for the full 60 minutes on Friday. I know it is good to be able to see that in case they do fall behind, they are usually very engaged and very apt to come back. They are they have that skill set and being able to come back. But I mean, I think especially now with a healthy roster, a lot of guys ready to go. I think it'll be important for themselves even to just get off to that start to say, you know what, you guys caught us on a bad weekend. You might maybe you underestimate us a little bit in terms of what we are, in terms of what you've seen from us this season, because it was such a shorthanded effort. But I do think I'm going to be looking for that part of their game to really come out hot. But Nate, any other keys to Minnesota's victory or to anything you want to see out of the Gophers this weekend to kind of set them up for? Obviously, I think this is going to be their biggest regular season test of the season, before kind of they run into more of the top teams and it come tournament time.
Yeah, turn those opportunities into goals. I mean, that was really even in the 5-1 win, or sorry, 5-2 win on Friday against Notre Dame. It took a bit for the Gophers to get going. Give up kind of an easy soft goal on Notre Dame's first or second attempt of the game, and you've seen that too much from Minnesota, where just there's a difference between playing ahead 1-0 and controlling play versus controlling play and then just being comfortable playing from behind. But just that matching the depth and utilizing it against Michigan State, that certainly is a big part of their advantage when they're playing these top teams. To me, they had that opportunity this weekend that didn't really exist when the two teams met at Mariucci. And certainly, getting great performances from both Airy and Soulier, where I thought Airy certainly bounced back well from his performance against Ohio State. And especially, I mean, again, same thing against South Bend. Gave a really early fluky goal, kind of Brad Radke'd his way back. It wasn't tested too much, but just looked better as the went on. Soulier gave up 4 goals, but I didn't think he played. I didn't think it was a tough night for him. Just, he made the saves he needed to. He didn't get to the ones that you kind of just didn't really have much of a chance on. I don't expect either goaltender to be able to match Augustine, but if one of them does on one of the nights, I mean, that is just to put him ahead on that, and that'll be the difference for me.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can do with the solidity of just a stud young goaltender, and I think Augustine has proven how consistent he is year to year so far, both in the national sense and in the college sense. It's hard not to really just admire the greatness of goaltending, especially at this level that he's provided Michigan State, just because how consistent you can be as a goalie at this level, and it shows. I think he's definitely ready for the next step, and to obviously it typically takes a while for NHL goaltenders to find stability, but given the track record that we've seen from Augustine in the last couple of years, it does seem like he's well set up for a good career beyond this. And I think the Gophers will be very, very eager to see the day he signs that NHL contract to get out of that program and to hopefully to see a little bit easier of a scoring prospect against Michigan State 4 times a year.
For sure. Yeah. And if the Gophers are able to kind of control play and make it their game, I don't see why Minnesota couldn't leave East Lansing with 6 points. I don't think it's going to be the easiest thing in the world. And I'm really excited to watch this series this weekend because these are certainly 2 of the top 3-4 teams in college hockey. But you can see in ways that the Gophers are set up to be able to defeat Michigan State, and they can show that they are one of, if not the top team in college hockey.
You heard it here first, folks. Gophers can get 6 points this weekend, but it will be interesting to see, because it does seem like they could very easily get 6 and they could very easily get 0.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's kind of the fun of college hockey at this high level, with two of the top teams in the country. But as Nate said, we're gonna be watching intently. We hope you are as well. But we'll be here to break it all down for you next week on the MNCAA podcast. Thanks to everyone for listening, and until next week, we'll see you at the rink.